Thank you for coming, everybody. Sorry for the delay. So since Friday morning, we've received a number of calls from the media, some of them from some of you, requesting comment in relation to the province's announcement on automated traffic enforcement. So out of respect, and in particular on Friday, we chose not to provide any comments on the issue, despite the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors ostensibly having spoken with Post Media. Police in the province hadn't received any update whatsoever from the province in relation to the issue. We did subsequently receive a letter from the Minister at 4:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon, and as you are aware, the Minister has since made a formal announcement earlier this afternoon. I'm appearing here today wearing two hats, in effect. One is the Chief Constable of the Calgary Police Service, and the other as the President of the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police. The Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police consists of police chiefs from across the province, all of the municipalities that have their own police services, as well as the Deputy Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The association recognizes that the issues of road safety and automated traffic enforcement as one aspect of it is a very important public safety issue, and as such, we took a strong position on this particular issue. The Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police works well and closely with the province on a variety of community safety issues. Given that our officers are on the front line of community safety 24/7, 365 right across this province, we have very good visibility into these issues and an informed perspective on important public policy issues such as this one. We feel compelled to respond to the province's decision on automated traffic enforcement for a couple of important reasons. The first is to express our collective disappointment over the process by which this decision was made, and the second is to discuss briefly the impacts of the decision, and of course the decision is relatively new. I'll first speak about the process. We are very concerned at what we perceive to be glib and perhaps inappropriate communication by the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors that serves to trivialize and effectively diminish the seriousness of what's a very important public safety issue in Alberta. He has repeatedly referred to automated traffic enforcement as a cash cow and to the locations, some of the locations where they're set as fishing holes. My colleagues and I believe that at a time in our community when many people are displaying a diminished respect for our institutions, including policing, we've conveyed to the provincial government that having a provincial cabinet minister speak in this manner is unprofessional, and it has the potential to undermine the public's trust and confidence in their police services. Ultimately, a loss of trust serves nobody and makes the job of the honourable police members doing the work on the front lines all the more difficult. Despite our formal request to encourage a more professional dialogue, earlier today you would have seen that the Minister did a press release wearing an apron and having a no cash cow symbol on the front of it, complete with a beef barbecue in the background. And while some might have thought that was funny, we would encourage the Minister to consider those citizens who have been injured or killed on Alberta roadways and their loved ones. 24 such Albertans have died in fatal collisions on the streets of Calgary in 2023, and year to date there's been 25 killed on the streets of Calgary in 2024. In 2023 data that I talked about, 54% of those collisions involved excessive speeds, and that says nothing of all of the people that are involved in serious injury, life-altering collisions every day in this province. In fact, road safety is a very serious issue to Albertans, and that's evidenced in community surveys where it routinely emerges as a top priority. It's an issue that deserves to be treated seriously by community leaders, recognizing the profound impact of collisions on individuals, families, communities, as well as the impact on frontline police officers, paramedics, and fire crews that respond to those collisions, and our healthcare workers that deal with them afterwards. The Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police is also concerned about the manner in which the input of our members has been characterized. In a letter, we were advised that these decisions will enhance traffic safety. We don't believe that to be true. Further, the letter stated that law enforcement in the province was engaged and that our feedback was instrumental in shaping these decisions. To be clear, the feedback we gave the government was not consistent with these decisions. At best, we believe that the input of the Alberta police community was ignored, and at worst, we're concerned that it's been mischaracterized. To be clear, what we told the government on this file was, firstly, that evidence clearly demonstrates that automated traffic enforcement is effective in making streets safer and in saving lives. This is particularly the case in larger urban centers where devices have been in place for some time and data is rich. We also believe that further restrictions on ASD or the removal of intersection safety devices will result in one inescapable conclusion. That is that we will see an increase in serious injury and fatal collisions on our roadways. We further said that automated traffic enforcement technology helps to keep our officers safe as well as the public. So we're talking about the fact that it offers an alternative to officer-based enforcement where safety is a concern. So I'm talking about those situations on roadways that are high-speed roadways where perhaps there's not adequate room to pull motorists over and do in-person traffic enforcement. We want to keep our officers and citizens safe during these types of enforcement interactions for obvious reasons. We stress that there are important secondary public safety impacts to this decision. So automated traffic enforcement technology has become an important part of an integrated response to enforcement of provincial traffic laws, especially in urban centers. So traffic enforcement has shown to be one aspect of a police officer's job that can, in appropriate circumstances, be automated. That contrasts with the majority of the officer's job functions which cannot be automated. Currently, there are a lot of complex challenges facing our communities, and Alberta's police services are on the front lines of managing myriad issues of all that have high risk. All of this has taken a toll on our organizations and our officers since COVID, and we realistically do not have the capacity to fill the gap in traffic enforcement that this decision will create. Finally, we confirmed that we absolutely do support, though, robust guidelines for automated traffic enforcement and intersection safety devices that are evidence-based so that every Albertan could and would have confidence that that technology, when and where it is deployed, is done so in a place where it makes sense from the standpoint of road traffic safety and is not a revenue generator. In Calgary, our approach has long involved a data-driven approach to site selection. And further, the notion of things like roadway design and roadway re-engineering is also something that's not new. It is an important tenet in the city's safer mobility traffic plan that has been in place for some time. Shifting gears then, I want to speak to the landscape moving forward. Obviously, we'll need to take a bit of time to analyze the impacts of this decision locally, but we know they will be significant. We do not believe our roadways or the Albertans using them will become safer as a result of these policy decisions. Police across Alberta will need to find ways to redeploy officers to address what will be a significant enforcement gap left in the wake of these decisions. What drivers need to remember also is that traffic enforcement, whether it's done through automated means or whether it's done through officer-based means, produces the very same fine. The difference, though, is that officer-generated tickets also come with demerits on your driver's license. Demerits have impacts on insurance eligibility and ultimately insurance rates, and too many demerits can also result in license suspensions. We will continue to work with the province to implement the changes, as well as finalize the still under construction guidelines on automated traffic enforcement use that are referenced in the letter. We expect to have more input into the process moving forward than we have been able to have to this point. And with that, I'll stop and open it up to any questions you may have.
Chief, just talk about the locations per se. I know the minister had said there's about 2,200 locations in the province. They're cutting it down 70%, so about 650. Do you have an idea how many are in Calgary specific that will remain and how many were in Calgary ahead of that?
So we'll have that information for you. I think that large number includes, over time, sites that had been in use but maybe aren't afterwards. Oftentimes we'll decommission sites when either the traffic patterns change or if the situation seems to have rectified itself. The other thing is, in those site numbers, we will have complaints from citizens who are concerned about a particular area, and we'll deploy what we call traffic studies using photo enforcement into that area. Some of those will become automated enforcement sites if they're deemed appropriate. In other cases, they don't at all. So I think that big number includes some of those. Just on the question of sites, though, I just want to add one thing. So the province identified in some of their communication one site in Calgary that was one of the top 5 revenue generating sites, is the way it was characterized in the province, and that of course being Beddington Trail and Country Hills Boulevard. So just maybe a little bit more color around that particular intersection. So in 2024, thus far, so year to date, we know because of the intersection safety devices at the location that over 9 million vehicles have gone through that intersection. Thus far in 2024, there's been 14,500 speeding tickets that have been issued there. So that actually comes down to 39.7 per day on average, or 1.6 tickets an hour. And that equates to 0.1% of drivers that went through that intersection received a ticket. So when you focus on just the revenue side, as was the case there, we talk about the amount of money in a large city that was generated, but that is 0.1% of drivers that went through that intersection who were actually fined for speeding. And that's consistent with across the city where we have intersection safety devices. That number is consistent. 0.1% of people are being ticketed there. So since 2004, that's when intersection safety devices went into that particular location. There has been 0 fatal collisions at that location since 2004. So the impact of these, you've got to not just look at the numbers of tickets and what it generates. You've got to look at the number of vehicles that are going through there. These are major intersections in a major city that would require full-time enforcement there to make sure that we could do the same thing that automation is doing. And again, when I say that we don't have the capacity to do that, I'm very serious when I say that.
The minister said, just a follow-up here, the minister had said that this now lines us kind of with Ontario, like with the number of areas, I guess, in the province compared to, say, Ontario. We're one of the highest of 2,200 sites. So bringing it down to 650, have you guys spoken with the OPP, the police partners in Ontario about how to, I guess, use this now with the limited capacity of these sites? Have you reached out to partners in Ontario about how they're able to manage it, especially with the larger population up there?
Yeah, so I can tell you that we're closely connected with police services across the country. The issue that I think is interesting is we haven't been able to engage with the minister to hear about his number of sites in Ontario. He talks about, I think, having done a deep dive in relation to this issue, and I'm just concerned maybe he spent quite a bit of time in the shallow end of the pool. When we talk about the notion of comparing Ontario, now if it's just this is a very complex issue, I think people are getting that. If it's just arithmetic, if we just look to Ontario and say, well, Ontario has X number of sites and Alberta has this number, so obviously Alberta's wrong. I think you have to look at the context in both areas. We have had I believe, automated traffic enforcement in Alberta since 1987, and I think there were different levels of uptake in Ontario. But if you're looking at numbers in Ontario, so I think of the GTA, we hear people talk about traffic volumes in Calgary here and say, oh man, we have a lot of volume. We have very little volume in comparison to the GTA. So you might be able to see where you've got basically gridlock in traffic, where automated traffic enforcement may not be a good public policy or an effective public policy issue, because quite frankly, vehicles don't get going that fast in any event. So to compare the province of Alberta, which is a little more wide open, to those particular areas, assuming that's what was compared, becomes fairly meaningless, to be honest with you. So again, we'd love to be able to have had those conversations, to have been able to go along with the deep dive that was done, so that we could at least understand how we got to where we are. The information that we provided in the Alberta context, in the context of the big cities in Alberta, wasn't even acknowledged. So I don't know what was made of that, and the evidence that's been relied on to go this way wasn't shared.
Chief, you mentioned about having given input before this, and you mentioned about the possibility of people being harmed, possibly being harmed. Do you believe that these changes as they're pitched now could cost lives?
Well, listen, here's one of the fact sheets that was provided to the province. So basically, collisions at intersections that have automated traffic enforcement. So data was taken from a year before the implementation of automated traffic enforcement at those locations compared to 10 years later, okay? So total collisions down 33.4%, injury collisions down 55.7%, fatal collisions down 75%, right angle collisions with injuries down 67.6%, and rear end with injury down 51.5%. So when you look at those numbers, and these are Calgary numbers, these are locations within our city. So if we take that away, those treatments out of those locations, I think the inescapable conclusion is we get more collisions, and statistically, some will be serious injury and some will be fatal. I don't see how we get around that.
Is it an insult to the police services around Alberta that they're suggesting it's all a cash cow?
Well, the language is very insulting because I think it speaks to professionalism. The reality of it is it's been framed up as though, this is just done to generate money. As you can see here, like the reality of the work, anything that we do and any way that we issue a traffic ticket in terms of doing enforcement generates revenue. And that revenue is set by the province. So at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do in terms of traffic enforcement that won't generate revenue. So if you want to frame it up as that, I guess that's what you do. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at how things are deployed, we're not out there putting it out there willy-nilly. We have the data to tell us where these interventions are required and where they're going to do the most good. And following that, we're able to monitor how they do. So it is quite insulting, I think, to police services to have their integrity in effect questioned. It makes it sound as though we're out there putting these things wherever to make money and then, using the money for the Christmas party. The revenue that is generated by these things actually goes into things and programs that Albertans value. The reality of it is they probably don't know what those are until they start going away, and then they'll notice.
Chief, maybe you can tell us what those programs are. Tell us what the impact is from the lack of revenue that's likely to come.
Yeah, so a couple things. So there's when it comes to revenue from fine revenue, there's a split between the province and the cities. So the province can speak to where that goes on that end, but generally, I understand a lot of it has to do with victims of crime funding and that type of thing. But certainly for us in Calgary here, it's gone into traffic safety and policing. It's been part of the budget. So at the end of the day, it funds, we've got right now in surveys with the public, we can get you the percentages, but a high percentage of Calgarians are not feeling particularly safe, and they feel the service is not sufficiently resourced to meet their needs. Internally, a large number of our employees say that the service is understaffed and doesn't have adequate resources in order for life to be manageable for them. So that's not exactly a perfect environment to say, okay, now let's take a decision like this, and now let's let the police go and figure out how to fill this gap. And that's been communicated to the province.
Is it a stretch then to say that this is defunding the police?
I don't want to get into all the rhetoric around that. At the end of the day, this isn't a political decision for us. It may well be for the province, certainly, and that's why they're called politicians. But this, for myself and my colleagues, is a public safety issue. There's implications to budgets, of course, because some of the money flows back to the municipality. But again, it would do a tremendous disservice to people in the city and to police officers to say that this is a cash cow and that the only reason that photo radar is deployed. When we can show you numbers like I just read off to you, the notion that this has been deployed only to raise money and it's a cash cow is insulting.
Has the CPS considered putting manned units out to kind of in lieu of the automated units being pulled away?
Yeah, so this is exactly what I'm saying. So in lieu of the automated units being pulled away, we will absolutely have to consider that. But again, you've got major intersections like this that have large volumes of traffic going through them all day long. They require the intervention all day. So the notion of every day putting cops out at a major intersection, so think about this in terms of practicality. You would have to have more than one police officer staged there somewhere because you need to see the phase of the light when people are going through it or somehow get the speed. Then you would need somebody to intercept that vehicle. And in some of these places during high traffic periods, I don't even know where you would pull people over that it wouldn't cause a major disruption to traffic on people's commutes. So there's the practical side of this as well. So, but yes, that's exactly what we need to consider now. So we're taking officers away from responding to dispatch calls for service, doing proactive crime prevention work with the community, and we're going to have to find a way to get them doing this type of work that was being effectively done with technology.
Chief, going back to the Bennington Trail spot there, I mean, City of Calgary open data shows that that particular location has had 17 accidents since 2017. The one previous, like the head of it, in Hidden Valley there has had 66, and the one on Bennington has had 32. I mean, there's pretty considerable differences in terms of the amount of accidents at the spot where the photo radar is versus the other two spots. Does that not speak to you to the fact that this is working in terms of that location, reducing the amount of traffic accidents?
Well, for sure. This is what we've been trying to convey is, again, like, it's like this is very rich data we have both in the cities of Edmonton and Calgary. And it's not that the smaller communities don't have rich data as well. It's just that the numbers, the traffic numbers and what we're looking at is very, very deep. And so at the end of the day, like, those numbers are very, very promising in terms of the work that's being done. And so I can't help but be concerned. The other number that actually struck me on this one in terms of a broader pattern. So basically, if you look at the collision rates, so per population, so per 100,000 population, so between 2009 and 2023, photo enforcement has helped reduce that collision rate across the city from 84.8 per 100,000 in 2008 to 38.2 in 2023. So when you start thinking about that, and then you monetize that, think about what that costs, and then think about the impacts on the secondary impacts on things like healthcare and that type of thing. Very, very significant.
Chief, is there a realistic path to getting this reinstated? And if you believe so, what does that look like?
I honestly don't know what to say. I would say that the decision is taken from what I have heard. And all I'm doing is watching the TV or looking at post media, I suppose. We're told by our ministry that we can't be told about the decision because of cabinet confidence, but apparently the minister can actually go out and do exclusives, and we can hear about it in the media. So I really don't know. I haven't spoken to this minister personally. I have tried since the end of July for a meeting and reached out no less than 8 times. And one time there was a meeting set. The minister canceled the meeting with no alternative, and we have not been able to speak about this.
Where do you think this is all coming from? What do you think is the driving force behind the government announcement?
Politics.
Just what the voters would want? They say that they're getting screwed over because they're getting photo radar tickets? Or?
Well, look, I think there's a very different experience of photo radar for people who are in large cities versus perhaps people who are in rural environments. You know, I know, having grown up in rural Alberta, I would travel to Edmonton, which was my closest place, and the odd time I would get a photo radar ticket. I didn't like it. I wasn't, in all fairness though, super, what's the word I'm looking for? I wasn't very knowledgeable or not very aware of the city and where areas of high collision locations were. So that's on me. Like I didn't like getting it. But I think, so if you ask people the question, do you like automated traffic enforcement? I think the answer would be no. I might answer it that way too. If you were then to say though, if you were to look at these kind of numbers and see what they're doing in big cities and then balance that off against your police resources in the city and what else can your police service be doing other than this, I think it paints a bit of a different picture. I would say that photo radar, I suppose in some ways is like Buckley's, right? It tastes bad, but it works.
This whole thing, is it making you angry? You seem a little tense.
On behalf of my colleagues, I would say that we're frustrated at the process, just because one would think that we could have an adult conversation about this. And at the end of the day, the decision's the decision. Like, we don't hold the pen on it, so we have no, misgivings about the fact that, a decision will be made based on what cabinet wants to do. But we have worked very hard to make sure that the ministries were provided with the information that we had, because we have it. And I mean, it's not my role to be political. It's my role to speak about what I think is best for public safety. My colleagues do that very same thing in their cities. And so from that standpoint, when 4:30 Friday afternoon, the letter drops, right? And you mean to tell me the announcement's not even going to be made until Monday afternoon, but the thing goes into effect on Monday? I just don't think that that's super respectful in terms of partners. And so I believe we are trusted partners in this province. But this doesn't reflect that, and so I hope that can change going forward.
Chief, can you clarify a bit of the communication? Because I know you mentioned that you'd given the facts to the province, but didn't hear about it, coming up into today. So what was kind of the communication leading up to today?
There's been extensive communication, including letters to the Premier. Letters went to every cabinet minister. We've spoken to most cabinet ministers, ironically not the one in charge of the file. But yeah, the communication has been extensive. There is no question the province understands the position of law enforcement on this issue. But like I say, I don't feel it was reflected in the letter back.
Chief, I just want to get your thoughts. I have a question I asked last week off topic in regards to the death down in Pine Creek, in regards to Lewis shot both sides. I know police have said that it is suspicious. The death is still undetermined. We were seeking some of that CCTV footage. Can you maybe provide a bit of an update on that case and whether or not you guys have been able to track down potentially a couple suspects involved in that case, and maybe the manner in which he did die?
Yeah, I can tell you, Tyson, there's not really a lot that's changed since last time we spoke. I think it was at the commission meeting. So the homicide's still under active investigation, obviously. It's a complicated one for reasons that I can't go into at this point in time, but investigators are working very hard. And again, I would still renew the call to say if anybody has any information about that, it would be great to come forward. Thank you. Thank Thanks, everybody.